What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Accelerate Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Mallory Marks, and I am joined by yet another wonderful guest today. We have one of our EA coaches, Marisa Silva, here with us. She's also a good friend, and I'm super excited for you guys to get to know her a little bit more, get to know her story a little bit more, her own health and fitness journey. And one thing I'll say about Marisa, so she's actually our longest coach with EA, and she is such a great coach. And I think the thing that makes her such a great coach is that she has truly walked the walk herself. So I am excited for you guys to get to know a little bit more about what that has looked like for her. She's definitely been through her own trials and tribulations with her health and fitness journey. And again, I just think being through those things makes somebody able to relate to others and help them through those same scenarios. So we will definitely get into that. Marisa, excited to have you here. Anything that you want to say hi to the people? Anything you want to start off with?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm super excited to dive into this episode too and just talk about exactly what Mallory mentioned. It's something too that I always tell my clients, whether they're coming from a reversing background or restriction dieting or gut health issues. I'm like, I had been through it myself. So I can definitely talk you guys through it, understand where you're coming from, especially from a mental standpoint. So yeah, really excited to dive into this episode and talk more about it.
For sure. And Marisa has a podcast as well, which we'll link below, but she's a pro. She's had it longer than me. So I might need to take some tips on the podcast side from you on this episode.
I don't know about a pro, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay, cool. Well, we're just gonna have a good, fun conversation. I haven't gotten to catch up with you in a while about, what's been going on with your health and gut stuff. So I'm sure I'll learn a lot and get a good friend update. But before we dive into that, I like to ask every guest one question. And that question is, what is one thing that you love about life right now?
One thing I love about right now, I love about life. I would say just living my purpose in a day to day, just from everything as far as obviously what I do for work. I'm just living out my dream every day as far as coaching women all over the world. Obviously, having the freedom and the flexibility in my schedule. I'm a huge travel bunny, so being able to see different parts of the world and just I don't know, lately I've, formed lots of also new friendships where I live. And so just living my purpose in, I guess, every single way, would be my answer right now.
I love that. I know you're a big travel buddy though, but you still haven't made it down to Austin. I haven't been here that long. I was gonna say I still haven't met you, but that's not true. We had our because it's all blurs together because it's wild to me. Like Natalie, for example, I don't think about that. I've never met her because we talk every day. So I forget that I don't see you in person every day because I kind of do. But yeah, you gotta make it down to Austin. But no, I love all of that, and that's great because I know you moved into a new apartment, but it's really the same town, right?
Yeah, so I'm 30 minutes away from where
Okay.
I grew up.
Okay.
But
But making some new friends and connections and stuff.
yeah. So I basically just found kind of a new friend group of girls and things like that here in Connecticut. So I really just enjoy them, love them. I won't be in Connecticut forever, but
Yeah.
for the time being, yeah, it's been really great.
Okay, not to get too far off the topic we are supposed to get to, but how, any tips, I guess, or how'd you meet these people? Any tips for somebody for because I think being an adult, I want to do a whole episode on this, but I think being an adult and making new friends is one of the hardest things.
Mhm.
And I got really lucky with where I moved and having already a couple connections that just spiraled into a ton. And people keep asking me how'd you meet so many people already? And I'm like, it's not the same. I didn't really move into nothing. But yeah, any tips for people of how you've met these people?
Yeah, so honestly, it started with a mutual friend.
Yep.
So I have a really good friend and she started connecting me with others. So I have a good group of three girlfriends, and then we just went to New York this past weekend, right? And for instance, a lot of them I just recently met and they're all we love this friend group. We've been going out together. Now we have, plans to do Secret Santa and stuff like that. But honestly, friends of friends.
Yeah.
And just being able to find a good group of girls who have not even the same interests and hobbies, because that's to me that's not I don't need to go to the gym with my friends and things like
Right.
that, but kind of just different professions and different interests and different personalities and things like that. So yeah, it's been really cool.
That's such a good point too, as far as friendships not having to be based off of like same interests. Obviously that can be a catalyst for sure, but I don't think it has to be. And I think there's a lot of other things that can make somebody a really good friend, because especially as an adult too, it's really great to get different perspectives on things and people who have different, hobbies and outlooks on life, etc. Oh wow, we'll have to get back on and do a whole episode about this. But anyway, the real reason I wanted to kind of have you on today is to just, chat a little bit more about, I know you've been struggling with some gut health issues and some health issues for the last couple of years. And that's been really, I mean, I've been a spectator of that for the last couple of years for you. And I know it's been really frustrating. And I, as the people know, can really resonate with it. While they may be different issues, I've been through my slew of hormonal issues, and there's just, it's so frustrating to feel like you can't get answers, or you can't like operate the same way you used to, especially when we come from this background of, being really into like bodybuilding and seeing our body change, and all of a sudden we don't have the same control, etc. But that's, going to be the kind of the rabbit hole we go down today, and your story with that. But I think one thing I guess we can start with to kind of set the stage is, I'd love to know a little bit about, like, basically a mini background of how you got into fitness in the first place for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So honestly, like growing up, like throughout like high school and stuff, I always played like lots of sports. I did like gymnastics, I did dance, like I ran track, which is also like not the most like entertaining one. Every time I say that to someone, they're like, why? And I'm just like, I don't know, I was good at it. Like, so I did that for like 8 years. So I was always pretty active. Like also too, when I ran track, I ran like every single day. So I didn't really have to worry too much about like food, as long as I had, 3 meals a day. Like I used to like not eat breakfast back in the day. But as long as I kind of like had enough to get me through practice, and I would come home, eat whatever, like it had really no structure. And then I went off to college my freshman year. I was like, I wanted to get out of the cold. I want to go down to Florida. And I did, and it was great. And I made so many awesome friendships and had the time of my life. But also too, I did not give like two thoughts to what I was eating, right? Obviously, lots of drinking alcohol, lots of meals out, just like really no structure, especially like going from having, cooked meals at home to then like living in a dorm and not really, knowing what to expect. So you can only imagine the weight went on pretty quickly. And so I was there for a year, and, during the time too, I kind of tried to go to the gym and like do little things, because I knew that I had put on weight, right? Like I just knew I wasn't super duper comfortable in my skin. I would say like I was still like pretty confident, I would say, even just like throughout the weight gain and things like that. But I just knew that like, okay, I don't feel my best. Like I know this is not how I want to be living, things like that. I ended up honestly just transferring and moving back home just due to different reasons. And when I did come back home, I, still spent like my sophomore year, that first half partying here at some, school in Connecticut. I was not really, didn't have the partying out of me yet. But then my second semester, it was like something switched in me, honestly. Like, some people really say like, oh, you don't just pick one day and like everything shifts. But for me, that happened. I picked one day. I don't even think it was like a New Year resolution or anything. I was just like, I'm done living like this. Like, I know I can do better. Obviously, this was 2016. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go on Instagram and look up articles and things like that. And it was like 1,200 calorie diets, restrict these things, don't eat that, things like that. So I dropped 40 pounds in 6 months.
Wow.
Not doing it the right way though. And that's where I then later on down the road had to fix that. But I did drop like 40 pounds in about 6 months. But obviously with that came like, I tried to start eating more after the fact. And I was like, okay, why am I not able to like eat more and like be able to maintain this? So like my weight would fluctuate a little bit and things like that. But I also had a lot of like that restriction, that binge restrict cycle. So then obviously as I started to start eating more, I would binge and then restrict and then binge and then restrict. And I got into a really, really, really slippery slope with that, as anyone who's probably listening to this and been in a similar position, they could know. So in about probably late 2017, I sought help from a coach. I knew that like I needed to be doing something different. I started to see some things about reverse dieting. I was still able to keep a lot of the weight off. Like I was still averaging like down 35 pounds, but I still knew that like this isn't healthy. This isn't how I want to live my life, right? I don't want to come home and just like make sure everyone's sleeping and raid the pantry. Like that's how bad it was. So I was like, I need to do something different. I hired a coach. He put me through a reverse diet, right? We're able to really get my metabolism like in a good spot and like feel good, completely change my body recomposition, which is a big thing for me. So I kind of like went through that phase and like started to, find that. That's also too when I went for my personal training certification and really, really got into things. I mean, online coaching was there, but it wasn't as big as it is today. Then I was like, this is so cool. Like this man has helped me so much. And he's like on the other side of, not the world, on the other side of the country in California. So it was really, really cool. And then from there, I got really into it. I wanted to, compete in a bodybuilding prep, which I had started at the end of 2019. And then COVID happened, right? And everything kind of like, got it just didn't end up working out, which was totally fine. And I know that was like always one of my goals. If you ask me now, I don't know. That's still like, I don't know if that's ever going to happen now, just given the fact of everything I've been through since then. But went through like a little bit of a prep, but then ended up pulling out right around when COVID happened, March, because all the shows were canceled. And, I was feeling pretty good up until then. I was kind of going off on my own, no longer had a coach. And then come September 2020, when my life took a wrong turn, not actually, but that's when all my health issues started coming, and they came fast and really angry, to say the least. So right around September 2020, I started having like, and also too, up until this point, I was doing a longer reverse dieting phase and I was like super duper hungry, right? I lost my menstrual cycle for a short period of time as well when I was prepping, which I was getting back, but I knew something was off. I was having like lots of crying episodes, which was really odd for me. Like my menstrual cycle was all messed up as far as like it was coming every 2 weeks. So there was a lot of different things going on, and I kind of knew something was a little bit off. But then come September 2020 was when my gut health just took a complete halt. Having just tons of bloating, tons of constipation, not going to the restroom for days and days at a time, to where I then ended up in the emergency room. And I was like, something is extremely wrong. I don't know what's going on. Like, it literally, again, was like a switch that flipped, and I had no idea what was going on, to when they did some CAT scans and things like that. And the only thing they told me is like, you literally just have not gone to the bathroom. And I was like, yes, I understand.
Great. I know that.
Like, they're like, that's all we can see in the CAT scan. I'm like, I know that. That's why I came here. But like, why? Like, that's not normal. I think it was maybe like, it was bad. It was probably like over a week or something crazy like
Wow.
that I ended up in the emergency room for. So obviously they hooked me up to an IV. They gave me, some meds that like helped temporarily. But then from there I was like, wow, I really need to seek help from a coach, maybe someone that can start to help me with this, because I was so uncomfortable. I had put on like, I had not like obviously to where I was beforehand in my freshman year, but I had put on some weight that I was just like, why am I carrying all this additional weight? Like, something is just way off. Like, I don't feel at home in my body. So come to find out, I did some like elimination diets and things like that with the coach, but then I got tested for SIBO or SIBO. So that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So I got that diagnosis in May 2021. So now it's been like almost, that happened in 2020, like September 2020, May 2021, I finally found out that I had SIBO. And when I did, get tested for it, they did say I had very, very high amounts of both. So there's like three types: there's methane, there's hydrogen, and there's like a combination of them. So I had both types, very, very high levels. When the doctors, responded, they were like, wow, we don't even know how you've been like functioning on a day to day. And I'm like, well, that makes sense why I feel absolutely terrible. So then fast forward, and if anyone knows or like is familiar with SIBO, it is a B to get rid of. The relapse rate is about 85%. So you can only imagine how long that took, because the doctors will prescribe antibiotics, but sometimes antibiotics don't work. I got antibiotics, felt great for 2 weeks, and then relapsed hard. So it also just like, it's like I said, it's a pain to get rid of it. So kind of like fast forwarding into that, I did a low FODMAP diet. That kind of like helped things. I don't know necessarily when the SIBO went away completely, but I just recently did a Dutch test and a GI map this past June to show I no longer have SIBO. So that was very exciting, but I was still struggling with some different things. I did have surgery for endometriosis about a year ago, last December. So that was something that my gynecologist and also to my GI doctor started to kind of like think about, because I did have some things like bloating, pelvic pain, things along those lines. So I did have surgery for that, which of course helped with my symptoms. I think that was something that existed long before my gut health issues. But fun fact, if you have endometriosis, you are also at a higher rate for SIBO, which makes sense because of the inflammation in your body that endometriosis causes. It basically slows down motility, causes you to more likely have SIBO or SIBO. So basically keep going, starting to feel much better. And then this past June, I figured out that I also had some parasites and basically adrenal fatigue. So I'm not sure at what point this happened, but it was really helpful to kind of get like a full spectrum. But basically adrenal fatigue is that right in the morning you have cortisol, and your cortisol is what spikes to wake you up. So I am waking up with Zippo, nothing. So again, we're not sure kind of like when that happened. Basically, when that happens is you're have some pretty high stress for long periods of time to where your body eventually gives up. Was I going through a ton of high stress, just what my body had been through the past like 2-3 years? Yes. So I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was the prep. I don't know what it was. It's kind of hard to say. It was this point in time that this had happened. But that was that. I mean, parasite was a pretty easy. You just do kind of like a parasite cleanse and things like that, which fun fact, everyone has a few parasites in their body at all times, which I learned that. But fast forward to now, I am really just working on my adrenals. Obviously I'm doing like supplementation for endometriosis, so that like when you have endometriosis you have estrogen dominance, which can start to cause a lot of these things. So I've just been doing some different things as far as like I have a histamine intolerance, so I'm on a histamine blocker. I'm doing things in regards to controlling my estrogen levels, really managing my stress, focusing on routines, having some support for my adrenals. But it's been a journey, but I am nearing the end with just like so many answers. And what frustrates me too is like I love doctors, they're so helpful, but I was going to the doctors for so long and they kind of would just say, you're healthy, you're a healthy person.
Right.
You have some muscle on you, your blood work looks great. And so that was very frustrating in itself.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. You've definitely been on quite the journey. And there's a lot of ways we could go with this. And I do, before we finished wrapping this episode, want to touch on towards the end, the like mindset that you've had to kind of how your mindset has shifted with your health and fitness. Cause obviously I know it looks a lot different today, and the way you have to train, the way you have to eat, than it did, when you were in that phase of I'm like potentially even prepping, competing, like just I'm grinding hard in the gym, I'm slamming calories or going through these like cut phases. Like when, it was that fun grind type of energy. I know it obviously looks very different, and that's a huge mental battle in and of itself. So I want to touch on that. But before we get there, I think that there was a lot of like interesting things in there that people would love to know a little bit more about. You kind of touched on it for yourself, saying that it sounds like the endometriosis is potentially what caused your SIBO. Is that the cause for a lot of people, or how does one do you kind of know how one ends up developing SIBO?
It really can depend on like a variety of things. So I've looked into it, and one is just like misuse of antibiotics. So if you think about it nowadays, I mean, when you have a cold, when you have any type of sickness, they recommend antibiotics, right? Which is great because it helps the sickness, but also to like prolonged antibiotic use can also impact that as well. I mean, I was on Accutane when I was younger for a very long period of time. So could that have maybe played into it? Yes. People say stress levels, things like that. I mean, there's no like exact correlation. I recently learned that people who have endometriosis do have a higher rate of getting SIBO, but honestly, like anyone can get it. But I will say it's kind of like, I would say it's a little bit more prominent even in the fitness industry now.
Mhm.
If you feel like a lot of stress on your body and things like that. But I'm no expert in it. I just obviously did so much research on it because it was what I was
Yeah.
experiencing. I'd never heard of it until I got tested for it.
Do you know if it's something that for you specifically was kind of at some point, maybe, I don't know, like did it start when you're younger? It's kind of always building up there and then it just like hit a wall and showed itself at some point? Or is there something that you know that kind of triggered it for it to have never been really noticeable? And then, like you said, it just everything came to a halt and you saw the side effects of it.
Yeah, I would say maybe it was like a little like, dormant in my body probably. But I think definitely the stress of the prep and kind of like I said, like I knew something was off like hormonally during that time, just given the way that my body was reacting. And I think it just hit its limit and it was a mess from there. Maybe I had a little bit of SIBO, but kind of like maybe not super noticeable. But then that one day, it was like Labor Day, September, because I remember
Those
the
things
day.
like
I
scarred in your
remember the
memory.
day. Maybe, I did have like an alcoholic beverage that day, and maybe that sent me over the edge. I don't think it was, but yeah, that
And you
was
you may never know the answer to this, but if you have to look back and you're like, that's what caused it, do you point at the prep?
um I don't think it helped. I don't think it helped by any means. I mean, also, I don't think like the binge restrict cycle that I
Right.
put my body through also helped. I think it was probably a combination of things. I do think prep is what set me over the edge.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and I mean, it's a good reminder for people of why, because prep is essentially it's a restrictive diet. It's a controlled restrictive diet with a purpose, and you try your best to do it in a healthy way with supplementation and getting blood work done and making sure you're at a good point and everything before. And it's different than like, just trying to restrict yourself to 1,200 calories from like a lifestyle weight loss perspective, but they have similar, the body's responds in similar ways. So it's a good reminder of why that's not the method, to try to lose weight. Another thing you said kind of when you were sharing your story is that it was a lot of the stress, right? And I think like at least you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like from your story, it's not necessarily stress of like life stress, but more stress in terms of what you're putting on your body as far as dieting is stressful, right? It is a stressor. Training can be a stressor. And so I think it's also a good reminder of stress is not just how you feel. Cause I think like, I mean, a lot of us Americans, especially in this day and age and hustle culture, like we are actually stressed, like lifestyle stress. There's not enough hours in the day. Like anxiety, all those things, but some people are like, I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm collected. I don't understand why I'm still having problems. And you have to remember that it's not just stress in your like brain. It's also the stress, not sleeping is a stressor, etc. It sounds like for you, that's more so what it was.
Yeah, 100% because everyone would tell me like, "Oh, you're stressed out, you're stressed out." And I'm like, I like to think of myself as a pretty like calm and cool,
You're a
collected.
pretty chill person.
But I do think it was like you're saying, like my training looks vastly, vastly different now.
Yeah.
Like I can only train 3 days a week,
Okay.
maybe 4 exercises, 5 exercises max. I can't train to failure. Things have looked vastly, vastly different in that regard.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of actually touch on that. So trainings, yeah, had to been brought down a lot with intensity. What about nutrition? Has that looked pretty different?
Yeah, so right now, and actually probably for the past like year and a half, I've actually been intuitively eating. Just because like any kind of thing that not that tracking is stressful, but the woman I'm working with now, she's like, I think this is going to be the best route for us, just because I also had a horror experience with elimination diets. The coach who had put me on an elimination diet did put me on an elimination diet for 6 months, and you should not do that. You should not do that. And I didn't know any better because I needed help with my gut health. I thought that's what I had to do. So I had a little bit of a scarring experience, as I know a lot of women do when they come into, EA and things like that. So I did have a little bit of a scarring experience with elimination diets. So the woman I'm working with now, she's like, you've been intuitively eating. We're gonna focus on that just because I've also been tracking for like 7, 8 years. I kind of am at a place in my life where I can do a little bit more of like that intuitive approach. And that's actually something that's gonna work well for me and like the stress on my body and things like that. So that's what I've been doing in regards to like nutrition. Still focusing on like getting in tons of water. Honestly, my step goal is only about like 7,000 steps a day because we don't even want it to be upwards of 10,000, because we're, again, trying to keep stress very, very low on my body. But yeah, there was even a point in time where I was only training 2 days a week. So
And
yeah.
that's a big shift for somebody who was so, it's their passion, whether it's because it's in a healthy way or not healthy way, but like I was the same way. Like we're obsessed. It's fun when you first get into it and you want to be in the gym every day. And it's a hard halt to go from that to, okay, I'm eating intuitively. I'm not eating for body comp anymore. I'm not training for body comp anymore. How have you also how has, I guess, your view and mindset around how you approach health and fitness changed?
Oh my God, yeah. This is like insane for me because even 3 years ago, I was a little anal, honestly. I was like pretty anal about it. Like I was very like, to myself about it. I had to do a specific thing if it was not my free meal. Like, I just like to have a lot of control over those things. And this has really forced me to like take a step back, like things that I would never think about, like eating out 2 to 3 times a week or taking an additional rest day and things like that. And this has really taught me to like slow down in that regard of like, maybe you should find another hobby outside of the gym type of thing as well. I realized like how much my identity was tied to the gym. And I think this is also good for me too, as far as like a coach, because it's made me realize that like not every single person that comes into EA wants to be a bodybuilder and things like that. Right. So also too, realizing and like coming at it from that place has been so, so helpful for me. But I don't think I would have been that way if this did not force me to take a step back.
Totally. I like what you said about it making you a better coach in terms of seeing that not everybody wants to approach it the same way. Like we found the gym and we loved it and we became obsessed. And you don't have to be that extreme to still get great physical results and still have health and fitness be at a place in your life. In fact, I would argue that, I don't think that's wrong. I love that stage I went through. And I think as long as you approach it in a healthy way, you can like make it your passion too. But it doesn't have to be. And for most people, what is going to be healthy is training just 3 to 4 times a week and getting, 8 to 10K steps and just making sure you're eating like good quality foods. And that's enough. Right. And so I think for us being able to be on both spectrums, because I very much kind of have approached a similar phase of my health and fitness journey too, as you just described of, yeah, just being able to, go out to eat, no big deal, like be intuitive. And that's ultimately, I think, the long-term goal for everybody, or should be. And so now getting to experience that ourselves definitely makes it easier to, again, like I said, walk the walk. You're going to be able to help somebody else walk that walk. So I think that's so great. What is one thing, because I know even just hearing you talk through this whole last couple minutes, an hour, you've obviously learned so much going through this process for yourself that you've been kind of forced to learn. What's maybe one thing that you have learned and really, taken the initiative on yourself to dive into wanting to learn more about?
Definitely just like gut health as a whole, honestly. Like now I have some girls who I've been working with a little bit more closely. Honestly, I was that person before that like people would be like, "Oh, I'm bloated." And I'd be like, "Oh, that girl always says she's bloated." Like is she actually even bloated? And that was, I feel like that was my karma full circle, because I was like, "Oh, she's not really bloated. Like she looks great." Things like that. And like, wow, now I will never ever ever, like if someone is like, yeah, like I have these things, I feel bloated, like I don't feel great, I completely 110% will always be like, yes, I hear you out. I understand that. Almost like being a stranger in your own body. So, I mean, it's definitely made me super duper grateful for like my health, and kind of like I know I will get back to that place that I was at beforehand, and I will be so gracious for it. Like I truly, truly will. When I get back there, I know I'm nearing that corner,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's definitely been something that like I just took for granted, I think, beforehand, and just like really, really diving into like gut health and like histamine intolerance, which I didn't even know what that was beforehand, and things like that. So just knowing that there's so many complex things, as far as like I wouldn't have known what SIBO was or candida or any of these things beforehand. And I think it's definitely, I mean, it's allowed me to learn so, so much along the way.
You mentioned too, that you even prior, maybe in your early stages of being a coach, you, yeah, didn't maybe take as some comments as seriously, just with, lack of experience. And then also in your own journey, you went to doctors and they kind of said, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. So ultimately for you, what was the turning point of kind of who figured it out? How did you figure out? How do you know where to go to? Because if for anybody who's struggling out there feeling like, yeah, I'm saying I'm bloated and no one's hearing it, like, where do I go? Where do I actually find out if I have a problem? What would your advice be?
Do your research, definitely find a good doctor. I will completely be honest. The first doctor I went to about my gut health issues, she told me to buy a bigger pair of pants because obviously the ones I was wearing was not fitting me. I swear to God. That happened. I ended up in the emergency room that night. So that was like my first experience. And like I was frustrated. I won't lie. I left some doctors' offices in tears just because they would say nothing is wrong with me, you're totally fine. I just saw multiple different doctors and I advocated for myself. I said, this is what's going on. This is when my symptoms started. I know this is not normal, until I eventually found a doctor who said, hey, have you ever been tested for SIBO? Same thing with my endometriosis. For 7 years, I told them I had pelvic pain issues, things like that. And then finally last year, one of the doctors was like, hey, have you ever heard of endometriosis? And I had, and I kind of already knew. I did a presentation back for the AA coaches like maybe 2 years ago, and I did it about endo and PCOS and things like that. And in my head, I was like, I have this. Like, I know I have this. So even being able for that to come full circle, but honestly, finding someone, because there are people out there that are going to advocate for you. Like, you have to advocate for yourself to a certain degree, because if I gave up after the first person, I would have never know all these things later on. But like, honestly, advocate for yourself. Don't give up after the first one, right? Like, if I had done that, like, I would have been screwed. So just continuing to advocate for yourself and talk to others in your area. Like, if they have gone to doctors, if they really like their, PCP. And also I went to my PCP and they referred me to a gastro, who then referred me to a gyno. So get all the specialists, because you're going to need them, because also too, doctors can only do certain things in their scope. I told my PCP I was struggling with stomach, go to the gastro. So, obviously being able to find certain people who had that specialty. But yeah, just advocating for yourself and finding someone who's going to listen. Also too, lots of coaches nowadays are pretty well versed in a lot of these things, and they can be great advocates for you as well.
I was just going to say that and what a great answer, by the way, to end this out on. And I think that was a really good just reminder to everyone, is be an advocate for yourself. But with what you just said at the end, I think a coach's role, there are a lot of great coaches out there, and we're getting even more into like the functional space, where a lot of coaches are being certified and going through a lot of very rigorous continuing ed to be able to help with some of these issues. But obviously make sure the coaches you're working for this are truly backed by those credentials. But where I think the coach role really, really fits in here is, like you just said, being an advocate. Because at the end of the day, we aren't doctors. And just like, the PCP can't step out of their scope to work with something that's more in depth in terms of, whatever stomach issues, or like, we don't want to step out of our scope either. But we do have at least probably more knowledge than the general population to be able to help you notice, hey, this is not normal. Let's advocate for you to go to your PCP, and let me give you the knowledge and facts, and be able to have you walk in with confidence and say, no, I'm not taking this for an answer, or whatever. And I think that that's the coach's role, is to be an advocate for your client. So sounds like you had some really great ones that were able to help you kind of be an advocate and finally find answers. I can't believe it was as long as it was, but yeah, I think for anybody listening, that is definitely a great recommendation. So, well, thank you so much, Marisa, for sharing your story. I think this will resonate with a lot of people. Anything else you just want to round out on?
I think we want to touch on the mindset side of things, right? Like you said, something about how my mindset has shifted a lot. So I would say my mindset has definitely shifted from, like, instead of like go, 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 to taking a step back and knowing that like more rest is actually going to be better off, especially in a situation like this, when it is something like your health at play. Going to the gym more is probably not going to be the best bet, and like, being super meticulous with things. So I think my mindset definitely did a complete 360 in that sense of like, yeah, it is okay to take a chill pill and slow down and things like that, especially when you've got some things going on internally that you can only do so much on the outside.
Totally. I think that's great advice and a good reminder for anyone, whether it's gut health issues or you're just going through a season of life where life's kicking your ass, work's kicking your ass, whatever it might be. Sometimes the answer is that your body just needs the rest and to slow down. So couldn't have said it better myself, but I will post Marissa's coaching link below in the show notes if you guys are interested in working with Marisa one-on-one. Marisa, where else can they find you? People find you? Maybe plug away at your podcast or Instagram.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram as M Silva Fitness, the little dash at the end. And then I have a podcast as well with my sister called Not Just Gym Girls, where we talk about, health, fitness, relationships, personal development, all that thing.
Awesome. I will also link her Instagram and her podcast with her sister below as well. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here, Marisa. And thanks guys for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.